In this video, we are going to look at the process of building reports. We are going to cover the entire data modeling section in detail. And then we'll just quickly go through the pivot report, how the drag and drop and layout saving works. We'll also look at the dashboard, while the dashboard designing has been covered in another video, but we'll reuse the data models for the dashboard as well. So going on to the data modeling menu, you see 5 options here. And the first option which we use is the data sources, also called applications. Now, if you see, there are multiple data sources which have been defined here. They are all SQL Server for now, but you can actually add a connection to different kind of databases using the data sources section, and you can put in the connection string. Now, since you've got OLEDB and ODBC, using this, you can connect to any sort of database which you want, even what is not listed here. So we've got a number of clients, working with Oracle, with MySQL, and we basically configure the data sources. The next step is to define the data models. Data models and parameters, actually, you need to plan out. Now, data models, if you see, are nothing but SQL queries. So let's say, let's look at a sales report. We look at sales analysis. So this sales analysis is basically just a SQL query. Right? Now, typically what we do is we write the SQL query using whatever environment we are working with. So let's say SQL Server Management Studio, or we can use any other product for other databases, like for SQLite, you've got the SQLite Studio. So different kind of environments you can use to write your queries. And then you can just put in your queries here. The other aspect, what I was saying regarding parameters. Now, obviously, when I run the report, I want to have a filter. So if you see, there is a parameter defined here, date from and date to. Now, these actually work at runtime. So this sales analysis, let me run the Navision sales report. So what happens here is these parameters actually come in automatically in the parameters window. And we'll cover how parameters are defined and the different options available in parameters. If you see, these are different parameters which have been configured. Let's look at the date from parameter. So it's defined against the application Navision, which is, like I said, data source and applications are used interchangeably. This is the name of the parameter. Now this will always start with the @ sign. You have the caption. This caption is displayed in the parameter window, and the data type. So we've got 3 data types: text, number, and date. So these are the 3 different data types. Now, when you have a date type parameter, obviously a calendar is shown. So all these options are actually grayed out. So you don't need to select anything. But when you work with a text or a number, then it shows a drop down. Now the values in the drop down can either come from a query, or you can create a type list. So let's say, let's create a new parameter. Let's call the parameter country name, and let's say we're making the parameter for Navision. And this will be a text parameter type list. So let me put India, UK, USA, UAE, and Germany. So let's say these are the parameters which I want. So I've just created the parameter as a type list, and I can specify this is a multi-select or a single select. Now, when I use a multi-select parameter, I must use the in operator in the query. I'll show you an example of a multi-select parameter and how it is used in the data model. So let's look at a multi-select parameter. So let's say company ID. If you see, this is a query type parameter, and I have multi-select on. Okay. Okay. So if you see in this where clause, I have the company ID parameter as an in operator, defined using an in operator, because multiple values will be coming in. So here, what would happen is when you select those multiple values, it is automatically replaced by the query execution engine, and that is basically used to run the query. Now let's have a look at a query type parameter. Let's in fact look at this parameter. So we've got a parameter company ID. Now here, if you see in my query, I'm selecting the company ID and company name from my company master table. Now the company ID is the ID column and company name is the display column. What it means is you will basically have the ID being used in the query for replacement, whereas in the drop down in the parameter form, the display column will be the company name. So, you have two columns coming in from your select query. The third option is type value. Now, type value means there is no drop down, right? Obviously, it cannot be multi-select. So in case of type value, the user can type a value. So let's say that you are giving in your parameter, you're giving some search criteria, right? You want the query to work with the like operator and to search within item names or customer names. So you can have the user type out a value. So that is possible with the type value option. So these are the different parameter types which can be used. And then when I define my data model, so let's look at the parameters. Now within the parameters, I actually select that these are the these are the 6 parameters which are applicable for the query. I can even define the sort order. So based on this sort order, the display will come in the parameter form, right? So these are my existing parameters for the application. All of them are there and I can select whatever is applicable, right? And if you see, these are all different types. So there is query, type list, type value. Wherever there's a query, there is a for query type parameters, there's a query defined for the parameter. So using this parameter and data models, right, you are basically doing your entire data modeling for the reporting side, right? And your queries can be complicated, simple, whichever way you want. You can use stored procedures, you can use views. So all of that is permitted. Now, there is another type of parameter which I want to talk about. It's called basically derived parameter, and let's look at a derived parameter. If you see, this derived option is selected. Now, what does derived mean? Now, let's say I have a ledger group. Now, when the user selects a ledger group in the parameter form, the next drop down which contains the ledger names should get filtered based on the group which has been selected. Or let's look at a more simple example, which is basically country and state. So if I select a particular country, only the states of that country should be displayed in the state drop down. So there we use derived parameters. Now here, if you see in the query for the ledger name parameter, I'm actually referring to another parameter, ledger group. And this is what I have in my dependency, ledger group and company ID. So this ledger name parameter will depend on my company ID, right, and ledger group. That means when I execute this report, right, I will basically get the company ID, ledger group, and ledger name as my selection. When I select my company ID and ledger group, only then the ledgers get populated based on the filters. So this is typically used, let's say you've got 20,000 items, right, in your particular ERP database. Now you don't want the user to actually select within those 20,000 items or search within those 20,000 items. So what you've done is you've given a filter for stock group, stock category, right? Now, if I select finished goods and I've selected in my stock category, let's say there are brands, right? I've selected a particular brand, then my items will get filtered for that group and that brand. So it makes the life of the user much simpler in terms of the selection. So derived parameters can go up to any level. right? It's all flexible. You can choose to define it the way you want. Now, once you've done all of this, you can create reports. Before you create reports, you need to have a report group. So these are all my report groups. So report groups are pretty simple. It's just a single value. So all these groups which you see here, these are basically just from a navigation perspective if you want to segregate the reports. Now, when I click on add report, right, let's add. I'm going to add a test pivot report for sales. And let's put it in this cube. The type is pivot. For now, let's copy this description. Now, in case of pivot grid reports, you can select only one data model because it's a single table. But when you work with dashboards or spreadsheets, you can select multiple data models. For fixed reports, currently we support only one data model, but there is going to be a feature which is going to allow multiple data models for fixed reports shortly. So we are working on that as we speak, and hopefully within the next month or two, we should have it live. So I'm going to select the sales analysis data model. Right? So I've selected this data model and my report definition is done. Right? So whether you add a dashboard or a report, once if your data models are all done, you can just click on add report and you can add, create these different types of reports in seconds. Now, if I go here in this cube, I'll find this test report, pivot report for sales has been added. Currently, there are no layouts defined. So I'm going to click on new layout. Now the parameters which are linked to this particular data model, they already come up. Let me execute this report. Right. Now I've got a blank layout. I've got all my fields here. So let's say that if I want, an item wise and group wise, and let's look for the amount field. We have amount. Let's drag the amount here and let's add the company here. So I call this layout default. I save this layout. Now I can go to fields and settings and I can hide all these fields which are there. So just makes my report look cleaner. And I've got all my fields available here now. So I can just select the fields and drag and drop. And you can apply any of the other, pivot options or whatever you want to do. You can apply. But that's how easy it is to create a report. So if your SQL is already written, if you've got your SQL queries there, then you can create reports in minutes. You don't have to go through the cycle of designing reports. Now, in a similar way, you can add grid reports as well. Let's quickly create a dashboard also, just to show you how dashboards would work. I'm going to go and click on add and let's say test dashboard for sales. Let's put it in the same cube. This description here. And let's create. I've selected 3 data models because dashboard supports multiple data models. Let's click on save and let's refresh this. If we go here, we have the test dashboard. Again, there is no layout. So let's click on new layout and the parameters are coming. Now, depending on how many data models and all you've selected, this might take a little bit of time to execute. We go into edit mode, right, to open the designer. Now, if you see, I've got my 3 data models which have come in. Now I can start adding charts. So let me add the chart. So I've got my target versus actual. I don't think I've got any targets in this particular date range, right? I've got, all these options. If I want to apply top end, right? I've applied top end. I can add another pie chart from a different data model. Zone amount. I can add filter elements. Let's add a tree map. I can adjust the placement. So all these elements you can just add through drag and drop. And in this, let's add the company name. Again, by amount. So this is giving me the two companies. Now here, there are different options available. So if I want Stripe, slice and dice, verified, I can use this as a filter, right? So if you see, it's filtering the data. Now, if I click on cross data source filtering, right, it'll filter both the charts, but this chart does not have the company name. That is why you're not seeing that. But this query has the company name. So let's just add another chart and see how it works. So here, let's put the go down name and the amount. Now, if I click on, if you see the filter is basically filtering this value, right? Obviously, in the other company, there are no go downs. So let's take another dimension here. We'll take, let's say, the voucher type name. Remove the go down. Now, if I select trading, I don't have data for that. So that is why the filters, but the filters are working and filtering out the data based on your selection. Now, like you've saved layouts in Pivot, you can save layouts here as well for the dashboards, and you can create multiple layouts as per your needs. You can have tabular, graphical, whichever way you want. Now, in a similar way, you can add any other report type. So report designing, dashboard designing can all be done in quick time. You don't have to, spend 2 days in designing your layouts and working with your data models repetitively. You can just click, drag and drop, and your report is ready. Now, once you save the layout in the Windows version, it is also available on the browser-based version as well. So it's not that you have to design different layouts for the web, for the mobile, and for the Windows. The same layout is available across all the three platforms. So just to recap, this is the data modeling menu. In the data sources, also called applications, we create connections to different data sources. We've got data models and parameters, which is basically the SQL and the filter values, which you see on the parameter form. We've got report groups, which is basically for navigation, and then we click on add report. Now you can export and import reports. So let's say that you've got multiple deployments of EasyReports, or sometimes when we develop reports for you, so we basically export the report. It comes out as an XML file and it can be imported in another instance of EasyReports, or you can copy a report from one particular group to another. So let's say you've got a group which you've defined for testing, you do all your development there, and then you want to deploy it to the actual group, you can click on copy. So you can say source cube is this, destination cube is this, and then you can select your report to copy. So these functionalities are all given to you in EasyReports, and I hope it adds value to your reporting journey. So that's all for me as of now. In case you've got any questions, or you would like to connect for a live demo, please do get in touch with us at contact@easyreports.in. That is contact@easyreports.in. Thank you.